started. Again, my name is Dina Pradel. I'm with String Automotive. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks again for sending in such great questions ahead of the webinar. That really helps us sort of shape the content to make sure that you're going to get a lot out of the next hour. A lot of great questions around really understanding what's working for you on the digital marketing side and how to better use analytics and reporting to help you understand those things. And we're going to try to get at all those things today by really focusing on Google Analytics, which is a tool that many of you are probably already using and would like to use better. So we're going to spend about 45 minutes covering the topic, and then we'll take a brief Q&A session. And then for those of you that would like to hang around and join us, we will be giving a quick demo, about 15 minutes, of our new product, the String Dealer Positioning System, which is really our answer and attempt at helping answer some of these questions in a really visual and easy to use format that makes it easy for you to get at some of these things. At the end of the webinar, we'll also be selecting one attendee to win a 30-minute Google Analytics consulting session with one of our presenters, Matt Kolodziej. So check out Twitter at the conclusion of the webinar. We're at String Auto to see the winner. And we're going to be covering a lot of information today. Don't worry about writing everything down. We will be sending out a recording of the session tomorrow, so you'll have a chance to review this all again at your leisure. So if you have any questions, if you can't hear properly, or would like to raise your hand at any time, feel free to use the chat pane and shoot me a question, and we'll make sure to address it. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters, Ken Kolodziej, who's the founder and CEO of String Automotive, and his brother, Matt Kolodziej, who is our Director of Analytics and an expert on Google Analytics. So gentlemen, why don't you take it away?
Great. Well, Dina, thank you so much for the warm introduction. And once again, thank you, everybody, for attending the webinar. It's great to have you here. And as Dina mentioned, I actually had a chance to review some of the questions, and really, really great questions. So thanks for taking the time to submit those. So let's get started. This will be probably run about 30-35 minutes, give or take. We'll try to make it as painless as possible, but as action-packed and info-packed as possible. So let's do a quick intro. So my name is Ken Kolodziej, CEO and founder of String Automotive. With me is my brother Matt Kolodziej, who is as Dina said, the analytics savant, so expert. Hey, everybody. So let's get started. I'll go over the agenda very briefly. So we'll give a quick intro of String Automotive. Then we'll talk about the current state of the industry with regard to data. We'll go back to the future for just a moment, get a glimpse of tomorrow, and then, of course, get a glimpse of tomorrow today. And then really start to dive into some pro tips around Google Analytics, and then dive into two reports that we're going to create on the fly in Google Analytics. We'll show you exactly how you can do that. These are very, they may seem daunting at first, but they're really not very painful to create. It's only going to take us a few minutes for each report, and they will give you, again, using the free tool, of course, of Google Analytics, it'll give you some great insight into your metrics, your online marketing metrics. And we'll conclude, and then as Dina mentioned, we'll take questions. So brief intro to String Automotive. So we were founded in 2005. We've been dedicated to auto retail since then, based just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So of course the leaves are changing color this time of year. Very beautiful up here for those who are visiting or who would like to visit. We've always been focused on the digital marketing side of the equation, so to speak. And we spent the first 6-7 years of our existence building out a good, solid, robust digital marketing platform. And as we grew and as we continued to dive into dealers' problems, helping them through the digital wasteland, as it were, really helping them try to improve their top line and bottom line. From a digital perspective, we continued to hear a theme of data being very complex, and dealers needing some help with data around analytics. And so we'll get into that in a second, but really a huge focus of ours is helping dealers make data simple and be able to get actionable insights from their data. That, to us, is what we live and breathe every day. So that's what we're focused on, and we are the only Google Analytics certified partner in the automotive industry, and one of 220 companies worldwide. So it's a big feather in our cap from the powers that be, as it were, at Google. So let's talk for a brief moment about the state of the industry. So, back in the good old days, as it were, it was pretty simple with regard to advertising. Pre-internet, right? It was traditional advertising, pretty straightforward. Of course, you had really no idea, what was actually working for you, but the avenues to advertise in were pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Radio, TV, print, outdoor, maybe some direct mail. You didn't have a ton of different avenues to spend your money in, and so. It was pretty clear. If you had a good month, well, maybe you had a great ad in the paper. If you had a bad month, maybe your competitor had a great ad in the paper, and it was obvious. It was easy. And then the internet came along, and of course turned everything on its head. So as I say on the slide here, the world is no longer flat, and this is something we're all intimately familiar with, because as the years have progressed and as consumers have become more technologically savvy, all sorts of different vendors and software solutions have come up. And each one of them doing one sliver of the digital pie, and there are some really, really great vendors in the industry, as we all know. And it's great to have these choices, right? And of course, the internet makes the promise of the internet, everything is trackable, which is wonderful. But the problem is, all of a sudden, you start to get too many data sources. You have a ton of vendors. They're all siloed. They all have one slice of the digital pie, and that can become very overwhelming very, very quickly. To deal with all that data, to start to analyze and amalgamate all that data together and try to get any sort of insight from that data to figure out what's working and what's not working on a month-by-month basis. And so that's the situation that we're in right now. And well, what does that mean for managers? So ultimately, it's difficult to have accountability, both for vendors as well as for employees. In other words, who is doing a good job for me, and what's working, what's not. Of course, it becomes difficult to gain visibility into the digital marketing funnel because you have siloed data sets. Each vendor is going to provide you with a great report, but it's going to deal with the data for that particular vendor. And it's difficult to combine the different data sets together and the different reports together. And, vendors, we're certainly guilty in various fashions of this. Everybody is, defining different terms differently, right? So what is a lead? A lead could be defined differently one vendor to another. Et cetera, et cetera. And so it makes it difficult to aggregate the data sets together. And because of the accountability issue and because of the visibility issue, it becomes really difficult for dealers to be proactive in taking action, in seeing those insights, those competitive opportunities in your local market, and figuring out exactly what you want to do with regard to your advertising dollars, because every dollar counts. I mean, we're auto retail. I mean, margins are fairly slim, and it's very, very important to spend money properly. So I'll pause there for a second, and we'll have a little tongue-in-cheek reference to Marty McFly and Doc Brown, and we'll hop in a DeLorean for a sec, and we'll say, wouldn't it be nice if we could have the tools to not just see what happened in the past, but actually to anticipate what will happen. So to be really, really proactive, not just always sort of managing in the rearview mirror, as it were. Now, of course, we have the Tom Cruise reference up here from Minority Report, and again, another tongue-in-cheek reference, but that's really what we at String are trying to do our little part, so to speak, in the industry and push us forward, and really trying to get proactive and help dealers, not just what happened, but again, trying to get into the point of figuring out, okay, well, here's what we know needs to happen going forward. And that's a really, really powerful position to be in. But of course, there's no silver bullet. Wish there were, of course. I'd probably be on a beach somewhere. But taking it back to present, even today, we do have tools to help us. And so of course, we're focusing very heavily on Google Analytics in this webinar, free tool. Great insights out of that tool. And up here on the slide, I've also displayed R, and we're not going to go through R today. It's an open source statistical package. Again, it's out of scope of this discussion, but you can do some pretty cool number crunching with that. And of course, some old-fashioned elbow grease, and you can get some really cool visualizations that will help you to gain insight from your data. It's no longer Excel world. It's no longer just your simple line charts, line graphs, for example, time series that you get in Google Analytics. Once you start to visualize data in different ways, you really can gain some interesting insight. And so a couple of examples of that. So this is a screenshot from Google Analytics, some client data from a few months ago. And so I won't actually ask this question. We're in webinar format, so I'll ask it and answer it myself. So you see peaks and valleys and ebb and flow, so to speak, day in, day out. So you say, okay, well, what's the pattern? What information, what insight can we glean from this? And if we visualize it in a slightly different fashion, if we look at it by hour of day and day of week, you can actually see all the orange and red. Those are the most, the hours and days of the week where the most traffic is coming into the site. And so this is actually desktop traffic, and we'll get into segmenting in a second. But we can see that with regard to desktop traffic landing on this particular dealer site, most of that traffic comes through during the work week, with a little bit on Saturday morning and Sunday around noon. And so now you start to say, okay, well, if my desktop traffic is largely coming through during the work week, well, now I'm going to start to perhaps optimize my PPC campaigns a little bit differently, right? You know, maybe target different messaging, or certainly, obviously, different devices during the week versus, you know, after hours or on the weekends. And I don't have this visualization in the presentation, but looking at the mobile traffic to a site will give you the exact opposite picture. In other words, mobile traffic is very heavy on the weekends, on you know, during evenings, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just interesting to see how, you know, the same shoppers behave very differently when they're using different devices. And again, that's powerful information for a dealer and for a marketing, an ad agency, marketing partner to be able to use to craft different campaigns. And so visualization number 2, again, another line graph. This is traffic, again, to the website, but we're going to look at it a little bit differently. We're going to actually geolocate. Google, through the API, Google Analytics, you can actually get latitude and longitude information. And so if we plot this on a Google map, we can start to see hotspots of activity in terms of where visitors are coming from. And so again, that becomes very, very powerful to be able to visualize exactly where the visitors are coming from. And of course, as you drill down and see the behavior of those visitors, then you can start to have much better targeted messaging. Again, it's all about being relevant to your consumers. That's going to help you convert them. So with all that said, let's get started here, and we'll talk about 3 essential pro tips when you're using Google Analytics, and then we're going to get into building the 2 reports that we discussed before, the e-commerce report and the GM report. And so tip number 1 is to tag your traffic properly. So it's very, very important with regard to PPC traffic to link AdWords to Google Analytics. Not always possible depending on your web provider or your vendor, but this is certainly something that, in our opinion, is very important because that's going to give you maximum visibility into what's happening with your paid traffic, not just in terms of how many impressions, for example, there were, or where your ads appeared, but really what happened when those people clicked through and actually hit your site.
Yeah, and the problem is if you don't link the AdWords and Analytics accounts, Google Analytics will treat all your search traffic as organic traffic. So that means, even though you're paying for all this paid search traffic to come through, it's showing as organic and, incorrectly influencing your SEO analysis and giving you absolutely no insight into how your SEM is performing.
Right. Yeah, great point. And so there are some open source free tools out there. For example, Retargeter. I'm sorry, is that a paid tool?
It is paid, yeah.
All right, my mistake. So there are open source tools. Retargeter is not one of them. And you can use Google's URL Builder, which is a free tool to tag Bing and Yahoo ads appropriately. And another important point, obviously email marketing is a very big part of any dealers, or many dealers, I should say, advertising initiatives. And it's really important to, whatever system you're using, if it's possible, to tag, in other words, the end of the URL you're using for a link, for example, in an email blast that you're sending out, tack on a little bit of tracking code, so to speak. So that way, when someone clicks through on that link and hits your site, it will be appropriately attributed to the email campaign rather than just coming through as direct traffic. And again, you're going to lose visibility. If you don't do this, you'll lose visibility into those email visitors. And of course, you might mistakenly think that an email campaign is not giving you any value, when in fact it might be giving you a lot of value. And so that will help you out with PPC accountability.
Yeah, and these are things that you don't have to do necessarily. You can talk with your vendors about it. They'll all know exactly what all this stuff means. Tagging links in email marketing, linking AdWords and Analytics. This is all basic stuff that they can definitely implement for you. And all of a sudden, your GA count goes from looking like kind of a mess and there's no real rhyme or reason to it, to all of a sudden you see all your separate channels nicely separated out for you, and you can clearly see what's working, what's not, and what each traffic channel is sending you in terms of engagement, conversions, etc.
So exactly, it's the old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
So the better you can tag or label your traffic, the better Google Analytics will be able to display it for you. And in the first report that we'll build out, we'll be able to see why that's so important very visually. So tip number 2 is to set up goal completions. Goal completion is just the fancy name that Google Analytics gives, basically, conversions, leads. So Google is very flexible. It's kind of like an open, clean slate, open season, so to speak. When you get in there, they give you a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom to pretty much anything. Whether it's someone spending 30 seconds on your site, you can consider that a goal completion. Someone looking at 2 pages on your site in a row, that could be a goal completion. So you can pretty much do whatever you want, but we recommend to really pare it back, because you don't want to consider pretty much any activity that someone does on your website as a goal or conversion, because then it's going to completely skew your conversion rates. And it's going to prohibit you or certainly inhibit you from making good database decisions. And so we recommend choosing form submissions. That's kind of a given. Mobile clicks to call. In other words, if someone's on your mobile site, whether it's the same site that's just responsive, or a different M dot, for example, or iPhone dot, or what have you, really important to also start tracking the clicks to calls. In other words, if someone clicks a phone number, if they're on their iPhone, clicks a phone number on the site, that will generate an event, so to speak, and you can log that in Google Analytics. Same with printing out coupons, clicks for directions. These aren't hard leads, but they're certainly indicators of interest. Someone's probably not going to either print out directions or click on the hours and directions page if they're not interested in, at least checking you out. So ultimately, we say avoid conversions that have no direct impact on your bottom line. So of course, this pro tip will give you better insight into conversion rates. Really, really important. And lastly, we are big fans of segmenting, and that's why we said segment, segment, segment as the third essential pro tip. Classic example of that, mobile traffic, as we saw a couple of slides ago, mobile traffic behaves very differently from desktop traffic. And if you lump all the traffic in together, if you don't start filtering out, so to speak, looking at your mobile traffic separately from your desktop traffic, you could lose a lot of good insight into what those shoppers prefer, what they respond to, and how you should be optimizing landing pages, for example, or SEM campaigns, or what have you. And so Google Analytics gives you some pretty powerful out-of-the-box functionality to segment, for example, mobile traffic versus desktop traffic, so on and so forth. And you can get pretty granular here, but we're just highlighting 2 major categories, so mobile versus desktop, and then also separating branded organic traffic from other organic traffic. And what we mean by branded traffic, for those who don't know, for example, if I'm running a dealership called Anytown Toyota, someone going to Google and typing in Anytown Toyota and then landing on your website, in our opinion, that should not be counted as true search engine optimization, simply because you should you should really be optimizing for your own dealership's name. I almost can't put it any more simply than that. That's kind of a 101.
Yeah, you're always going to rank number 1 for that. And SEO is really about acquiring new shoppers, new visitors through keywords and searches where they didn't already know your brand name, right? So that's really what SEO is about. So you want to filter out all of those branded search terms where someone already is familiar with you, already has probably seen your advertising elsewhere, and is going directly to your site from Google by searching for your own name.
Exactly, and that's that gets back to traditional media. I know it's could be kind of a black sheep in the digital world, but ultimately traditional media still plays a heavy role depending on the market, depending on the dealership. And branded search traffic, so someone typing in Anytown Toyota, is not a perfect indicator, but certainly a decent indicator of sort of your brand presence in your local market, your DMA, for example. And so by segmenting, we get better visibility into search engine optimization, true search engine optimization, and ultimately more actionable information. So a quick note on ROI. So as we'll see in the reports in Google, we're just going to pause on this for just a minute. Google has some interesting functionality to be able to actually attribute a dollar value to a lead or to a conversion, or again, in Google terminology, a goal completion. And so, for example, if we say that the average closing ratio for an email lead is 10%, right? This is pretty straightforward math. times, some round numbers here, average gross margin per vehicle, if you're grossing $1,000, say on new, $1,500 on used, obviously your mileage may vary, of course. Ultimately, you multiply 10% by, say, 1,000, you get $100 for a new VDP page form submission, or $150 for a used VDP page form submission. Now, again, these are very simplistic numbers. These numbers are potentially high, but we're just trying to show that depending on how the internals work at your particular dealership, you can run this simple math, again, based on your own internal numbers, and you can plug in that $100, $10, $5, $500 value, whatever you end up getting, into Google Analytics. And that's going to give you some really interesting, almost bottom line insight into what's working and what's not, beyond conversion rate. Again, when you start looking at it as a dollar figure, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe it's human psychology, it just takes on a different, almost a different mindset or different, different mentality, so to speak, different meaning. So.
All right. So before we go into the first report on conversions, we're going to show you really quickly how to configure a conversion in Google Analytics, because a lot of these reports won't be nearly as salient without goals configured, and that goes for pretty much any report you run in GA. Without goals set up so that you can track conversion rates, goal values, values of various pages that you have, it's going to be a lot harder to get accountability from each of your vendors and which channels are performing best for you. So we're just going to move over to GA really quickly. As you can see here, this is a Cobalt dealer, one of our partners, and as you can see from the just the traffic graph here, they were definitely under attack by the MSN bot for a little while, and we instituted a filter for them to start filtering out a lot of dummy traffic, just to remove that from their analysis. And you can see right when we put it in, there's a steep decline. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with this. If Cobalt customers, you've probably seen this in your GA reports. All of a sudden, your direct traffic went through the roof. It had something to do with their Flex advertising program. I'm not quite sure why the MSN bot, basically the bot for Bing that goes through and crawls all the pages to index it for the search engine, went absolutely nuts on Cobalt for a little while. So we have a blog post about how to fix that. If you're curious about filtering that out for good, you can look into that. Just go to our blog.stringautomotive.com. But so one way to figure out where visitors who complete a form are being taken is to look at your all pages report, which is down here under the behavior tab in GA. And this will give you all of the different pages that your visitors have looked at. And so you're going to want to look for, you use a little search bar here to start looking for things like thank you or lead. And this, for Cobalt, it often starts with /lead submission. And so that's how you're going to figure out where, how you can start setting up these goals, because once someone completes a lead, they're taken to this page, so you can start tracking, okay, every page view here is a goal completion. Depending on your website provider, I know companies like DealerPeak, they use event tracking. String Automotive uses event tracking, but Cobalt, Dealer.com, they use thank you pages similar to /lead submission, so you can look in your pages report for that. And then once you have an idea of where people are taken after they've completed a form, hit the admin tab on the top right corner here, and this is going to take you to all the administration functions within Google Analytics. And if you see this grayed out, so you're unable to click on these, then you're not an administrator on your account, and you won't be able to access any of the goal information. So you'll want to contact your website provider to make sure that you're upgraded to an admin so you can start messing around with this. So look for the goals flag right here. Click on that, and you're going to want to create a goal. And you can just do custom. The template can be actually, I find, more confusing than just entering it in yourself. So once you've selected custom, you're going to want to hit destination page for Cobalt. Again, if you're on a site like DealerPeak, it's going to be an event. Type in you want to name this form submissions. Take you to the next step. And then so this goal would be anything that begins with /lead, or if you want to get more specific, lead submission. You can assign a monetary value to it at this point, and that's what Ken was going over with the $100, $150, or whatever it might be for your particular dealership. In this case, we'll just do 100. You can hit verify this goal to make sure it's working. You can see here that there is a conversion rate, so this will be a properly functioning goal. Hit create goal, and you're all done. And once that's set up, and once that's been running for a little while, you can start to get into some pretty types of traffic, whether that's referral, direct, organic, or paid. You can see the visitors, the percent new visits, the bounce rate for all your different channels, and then we tried to emulate the funnel here. So we have acquisition, then we have whether or not these people stuck around, that's bounce rate, the conversion rate for your various channels, and then at the end, the goal value, so the value for your bottom line right at the back there.
Just going to pause for a sec. Dina just came in and said that the audio was potentially cutting out, so let me see. I don't know what I can do to help fix this, but okay. Okay.
We can hear you now. I'll let you know if it goes out again.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks, Dina.
And so the great thing about this report is anytime you click in within one of these different channels, you'll get more information. So let's say you want to look at your organic. You have your various search engines. You click within that. You have the keywords that are driving traffic to this dealership. And then the last level that we have here is the landing page. So you can see within any keyword or source or channel, you can see what the landing page was. And you can start to really get into a branded term or used car dealer term. That's where you're really seeing some return on your investment.
Yeah, and that's where, as I was saying before, that's where it can get really interesting. Sometimes just looking at things with a dollar value, the data hasn't changed. We're just looking at it from a different perspective by pegging that dollar value to the form submission. And so now all of a sudden things become just more interesting, and certainly in a sense, a little bit clearer and potentially even more actionable. So it's a great little feature there. Even if you put $1 in as the goal value, that you don't have to run through the calculation. Just putting something in will give you that dollar value output.
Yeah, and I'll just run through how to create it really quickly. So this is all under the customization tab as opposed to the main reporting tab, which is where you land when you first log into GA. You're going to want to hit plus new custom report. I'm going to name this attribution. And then this is where you start picking the metrics. So these are the various numbers that you want to look at. So we like to look at unique visitors. We want to look at the percent new visits within those visitors. We'll also want to look at the bounce rate. We'll want to look at the goal conversion rate. We'll also want to look at the form submission rate, because that's what we've determined is our most important objective that we want to look at for each of our channels. We also want to look at the total goal value. And then finally, one of my favorite metrics, the per visit goal value. So even though something might be driving a huge amount of money in the goal value, if it's taking 10,000 visits to get there, it's not as valuable a source.
And so just to pause for one sec, so what Matt did with the metrics, you may not have realized this, but each one of these metrics, so unique visitors, percent new visits, et cetera, each one of these is a column in the report that we'll build out. So that's how each one of these metrics relates to the report that we saw, the finished report. And in another, I would say 45 seconds, once we go through the dimensions, you'll see exactly what it looks like. Again, this is a quick report to create.
And so once you get to the dimension drill downs, this is where you get to level it. So within each tier, when you click within one type of traffic, then you get to look at the source within that traffic. And then within the source, you can start looking at keyword for whether it's paid search or organic search. And then finally, you're going to want to look at landing page just to see get to the bottom of why one particular source or keyword or campaign is having such a huge bounce rate.
And that's while you're generating that, I'll also pause for a second to say that that's particularly valuable, the landing page, because with Google's recent changes, in the past it used to be just people who were signed into Google. Organic search keywords wouldn't appear in Google Analytics; they would be not provided. So you lost a little bit of your traffic there in terms of the insight, the keywords that drove those people to your site. Well, now Google is changing that to everybody who's coming through organic search, not paid search, but just organic search. Those keywords are increasingly disappearing. So SEO effectively is moving away from being a keyword-driven or entirely keyword-driven enterprise, in terms of optimizing content, et cetera, rather to, at least in our opinion, much more content-driven in the sense of just creating good, relevant content on a particular landing page or throughout your site that's going to, that consumers are going to respond well, and that's going to continue to help them dig in deeper on the site and, of course, find what they're looking for. So really content motivated rather than simply purely just keyword motivated.
And that's that. And the next report I'll show is a GM dashboard. So this is what this is under reporting tab. It's not a custom report. It's something more visual, a little easier to export and email to people. Similar to what we had before, this is that top level where it's the traffic type, and you see the per visit goal value as well as the total goal value that you've generated from each of your different sources. And then we've also included top used vehicles and top new vehicles. And we've grouped these not only by page views, but also by page value. So what's interesting here is you see something like the used Jeep Grand Cherokee. It has the most page views. However, the page value is only 3 cents. So that means, oh yeah, tons of people are looking at the your used Cherokees, but when it comes to actually converting, the Wrangler, the Chrysler 300C is performing far better, as well as the Dodge Ram 1500. So you want to get beyond just looking at page views and get into value and your bottom line.
Yeah. So again, another example of how same metrics, but ascribing a dollar value changes the game completely. So it's not just about BDP is great. It's certainly going to indicate a level of interest, but ultimately, when you tie in conversions and a dollar value per conversion, well, now the picture becomes even clearer to be able to see. Okay, well, as Matt pointed out, even though the Grand Cherokee is getting a ton of interest, very few people are converting. And of course, this would also allow you in terms of actionable insight. Yes, you can, in terms of stocking decisions, absolutely, but even more tactically, sort of more blocking and tackling. You'd want to pull up that used Jeep Grand Cherokee, and maybe the photos are out of date, maybe the picture quality is crappy, pardon my French, price is off. I mean, there are a number of, as we all know, a number of different factors that go into merchandising and of course, stocking the right vehicles to respond to consumers' needs. So that would indicate potentially something is, or clearly something is wrong with that particular vehicle. So let's dig in and fix the problem, so that way we can turn those page views into conversions and get that dollar value back up. So I'll just show you very quickly how to create a couple of widgets on a new dashboard so you can start playing around yourself. So the first thing you want to do is just hit the plus new dashboard button on the left there. And then once there, you can start naming it. So we'll call it webinar dashboard. Very creative.
Yep. And then right away, it'll take you to the add a widget page. And so with this window, you can set any number of different visualizations that you want to look at, whether it's pie chart, bar chart. For this, metric is the simplest one, and that's why for something that something that speaks for itself, like total website value, we just select goal value as the metric. You can label it as clearly as you want, just in case someone's goal value can be a little confusing. Total website value is a little more straightforward. Hit save, and right away it's displayed for you there. You can also, if you hit the customize dashboard button, you can pick your layout options. So if you prefer to have it just 2 columns as opposed to trying to squeeze it into 3, or one of these other options, 4 columns never works for exporting or for emailing. I prefer the 50% each side. That's a nice little way to organize it. And then we're going to create one more widget. Just I'll show you how to use the table, which is really where you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. So you pick a dimension. So we're going to pick traffic type just to keep it very high level. Break it down just by paid, organic, direct, and referrals. And then we're going to select the per visit goal value. And we're also going to select the total goal value. So that way we're organizing right away. We're going to call this value by traffic type. Hit save, slide it over to the right. You can drag and drop these in any order that you want. And right away you can see that organic is performing the best, no surprise there. Referrals are doing very well for them, not bad, and paid is just behind that. So you can see that, depending on what kind of investment this company has made, they've made roughly $740 on return for those paid search dollars that they've spent. Building the inventory widget, it's a little more complex. It's going to depend on how your website vendor sets up their their inventory pages. So that might be, you might need to contact your vendor for a little help with that. Or certainly you can talk to us afterwards and we can help out. But that's about it. That's how you create a nice little custom dashboard, custom report. And for the one thing I would stress though is before you get into this, definitely configure your goals and start setting up some goal values that make sense to you and your dealership. And you'll be off and running.
Well done. Well said. You are the Julia Child of Google Analytics reporting. That was fantastic, Manny. Thank you. Let's go. So we built those. So let's see. What's our time? 39 minutes. So yeah, let's get down to the conclusion. So hopefully those two reports were fairly clear in terms of how to build them. Again, the webinar will be recorded. We'll send out a link, so don't feel like you had to, scribble everything down all at once. And for whoever is going to be out at driving sales or especially digital dealer, we'll have a good digital dealer. We're happy to to field questions in real time, so to speak, in person, et cetera, et cetera. So more than happy to do that. We really, truly, as an organization, want to help dealers, want to help you guys. So. And of course, we enjoy using Google Analytics, so it's a match made in heaven. So to conclude, so what we've seen barely scratches the surface between the visualizations that we showed earlier, between even the pro tips, and between the reports that we built. Really this is just scratching the surface. This is just the tip of the iceberg with regard to data analysis and data visualization and getting actionable insights. There's a lot of heavy lifting involved, no question. It can be a lot of fun, but it can seem fairly daunting. But ultimately, from our perspective, this is where things get really, really interesting. So if you remember the slide, the world is no longer flat slide, and the proliferation of new vendors, each one taking a small slice of the pie, to us that's really exciting because now think of it as like a ton of puzzle pieces, right? And every one piece fits together with one or more pieces. And so we feel that it's our job to help dealers put the puzzle pieces together and actually start to see a complete picture from all of those disparate pieces. And so for us, it's a fun challenge to be able to work with these awesome vendors out there, get all this good data into into our system, so to speak, and help people crunch the proverbial numbers. And then that's where things get really exciting. And so you can see a couple of visualizations, extra visualizations that we've worked on, and you'll see these implemented in the dealer positioning system for those who stick around for the demo. You can get really creative when you start to combine different data sets, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting. And so ultimately, now I believe we'll open it up to the question session, Q&A session, and thank you very, very much for listening to us and sitting through the presentation. It was great.
Thanks, Ken and Matt. We really appreciate your time. I'm very sorry about the audio problems. I know we went in and out there for a while. We seem to be doing fine now, though, so hopefully that will hold true. Feel free to send through any questions via the chat panel, but to get started, we'll maybe address some of those that were submitted during the registration process. Ken, there were quite a few on a theme around how can I get more for less? How do I get more marketing results without necessarily spending more dollars? So if you could maybe address that question.
Yeah, of course. So that's a that is a fantastic question. I mean, it's an issue that I think every single person, certainly inside automotive, even outside automotive, struggles with. It's, how do I get more bang for my buck? And so, part of that, in my opinion, has to do with sort of the external, the off-site factors, right? So let's take a pay-per-click campaign, for example. You want to make sure that that PPC campaign, the messaging in the ads, whether it's graphical or text-based, is well targeted. You want to make sure that you're targeting the right segments. Again, we saw mobile versus desktop. Those people behave differently. Even if you look at the zip code by zip code, right? I mean, people behave differently, even within a single DMA. And so it's really important to nail the off-site factors properly, because that way you won't be spending money that is going to either help your competitors out by driving traffic to them, or it's just going to be driving a lot of traffic that's not really relevant to you, to the site. And then the flip side of that is, of course, what happens when people actually get to the site. And the on-site factors are equally as important, because if you're driving relevant traffic, but they're hitting the site on a landing page, for example, that's not appropriately optimized, those people are probably going to bounce, or maybe they'll poke around a little bit but not convert. And so, it's really important to have a holistic approach to this, to almost tag team it with your vendors to make sure that you're working effectively, not just on your website, but again, in the campaigns and the advertising sources that you're using to drive traffic to that website. And so it doesn't necessarily mean spending more money. I mean, in our experience, let's take, again, PPC, for example, we've found that you can actually pull back fairly significantly on PPC spend. Again, this is a huge generalization, but you can pull back by a good chunk on PPC spend and really focus on the areas where you're really selling cars, not trying to conquest so much, for example, and just try to own a good solid chunk of your own your core traffic, basically your core customer base, and you can do that very efficiently.
Definitely. I would say just from a GA perspective, if you get your AdWords and analytics tagged and linked, you talk with your email marketing vendor, you ask them to start tagging the campaign links, and you configure some goals that you think are relevant to what you're trying to do in Google Analytics. So whether that's form submissions, clicks for directions, whatever it might be. Once you really just make sure you have those foundational elements in place, so that your various traffic channels are actually segmented so that you can properly analyze them, and then make sure that you have the goals in place to be able to judge the effectiveness of those channels. And then once you have those in place, you can take a look and then begin to start evaluating what's working, what's not, especially if you start applying the goal values that we talked about. They're not going to tell you to the penny what the return on your investment was, but it's a good start, and it's a great way to start having more meaningful conversations with your vendors, so that you have a little more accountability, and you're able to say, well, look, the email marketing campaign generated 10,000 clicks or whatever, but 98% of them bounced right away, so I think we need to change the landing page. Or, okay, the landing page was all right because the bounce rate's going down, but still we're not getting any hard conversions that we at the dealership want to start tracking. So, just conversations like that can really begin to start helping, and then you can begin to finally see, okay, this guy's now working for me, he's performing very well, my paid search is doing better. You can just start to track the progress month over month as you work together with your vendors to make it better.
Exactly. Yeah. Can't manage what you can't measure. So,
yes, exactly. So measure first and then start managing.
Yeah.
Great. This question just came in from Mike Scarf. He would like to know, should I try to link Bing ad data into my GA reporting, or just use the Bing ads reporting?
No, what I would say is tag your Bing ads with the Google URL builder, or have your vendor do that. That way you can see all the data will all still be there for you within GA, but you do have to, your provider will have to go that extra step of making sure that the destination URLs in the various campaigns that they have set up, that they are tagged with the GA tracking parameters.
So basically, good idea to tag it.
For sure, good idea.
And work with your provider, work with your provider to actually get those ads tagged.
Definitely.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Matt, you addressed this a little bit, but Paul Schnell at Wilsonville Toyota, hello Paul, had a question around how can I use this data and decide what digital vendors I should eliminate?
Yeah. So if I may, take the first crack on that. So I would say, I'm trying to think about a phrase this, because we are not we're not necessarily big fans of let's axe somebody, let's just kick somebody to the curb, et cetera, necessarily. We ourselves, of course, are a vendor in the space, so to speak, although we certainly consider ourselves more of a partner. But from my perspective, it's better. It's not necessarily so black and white. I mean, I know, again, budget is always key. It's always important to, cut down to make sure you're spending money most effectively. We totally understand that. So I'm not advocating just, spending and not necessarily cutting people. But from my perspective, it comes down to, again, measuring, deciding what is working, what isn't working, and rather than necessarily cutting, if there's room for if the vendor, if the partner is willing to work with you to help improve the performance of a given website, a given campaign, traditional advertising, whatever the case might be, if they're willing to work with you, then that's a huge sort of first step, if you will. And that to me is the most important, because if they're going to work with you hand in hand and look at the metrics, have an honest conversation, nobody's perfect, right? But as long as someone's willing to improve, that, from my perspective, is the key here. And so, it's not necessarily about eliminating; it's about making sure that they're working with you to help improve their own performance. And that way, again, it gets back to, as Zina mentioned, it gets back to the first question of getting more bang for your buck. And that way, sometimes with a few quick tweaks, I'm not saying that's always the case, but sometimes with a few quick modifications, you can really squeeze a lot more performance out of the same budget or the same set of parameters, so to speak.
Yeah, I would. That's totally true, and I would say that if it's a vendor whose job it is to drive people to your website, so it's not an auto trader or someone whose job it is to maybe keep our cars.com, who maybe prefer to keep their shoppers on their own site, and so sometimes it can be tough to measure their effectiveness because they don't always send as many visitors to your site. They like to keep them on their own. It's just a different business model. But if any vendor whose job it is to increase your digital presence, grow your traffic and your web leads, et cetera, just make sure that whatever they're doing, just let them know that you want to be able to see it in Google Analytics and be able to get a look at it. And if you're an administrator on your GA account, then you can provide them read-only access, user-level access, so that they can go in and see, and so they can make sure that things that they're tagging are indeed coming through on Google Analytics. Because once, again, it gets back to the whole, it's hard to start figuring out what's working and who you should eliminate until you know exactly what each is doing for you. So once everything is set up in GA properly, and for any company that's meant to be boosting your website traffic and boosting your website leads, once it's in there and then it's in there properly and you have your goals set up, so you can definitively say these guys are not cutting it for me, or they're not doing as good a job as they should be, then you can start knowing who to eliminate. But definitely start with measuring things properly with companies like if you're doing a social media vendor that again, it's trickier because Facebook doesn't necessarily want to send anybody away from Facebook, just like Cars.com or AutoTrader, so it can be tougher. But for anyone who's dealing with your website, that should all be trackable. And with GA, you can do all of that as soon as you have everything set up the way you want it, and just tell them that you want to be able to track it in GA. You want to see it. You want to be able to, look at the reports whenever you want, and GA is a great way to do that. It's completely unbiased, and that's a fantastic way to start figuring out who you can maybe look to cut down the road. That's been summed up.
So Matt, I'm glad you addressed access, because Lee Fox just had a question around how can I tell which dashboards or reports were created by me versus my vendors, and how do I know sort of who has access? If she doesn't want to overwrite something they created, but be able to remember her own dashboards for all of her dealerships. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, well, if you're using a Google account that multiple people have access to, then anyone could log in and change your reports and your dashboards, et cetera. So what I would say is, if you want a private, account that has access to your analytics profile and your analytics properties, then just use a different Gmail account or another email account that you have set up as a Google account, and that way you know that everything you set up will be separate and private unless you choose to share it. So if you're logging in with something like your Toyota dealership at gmail.com, and several of your other vendors are also using that to access the analytics, then those reports will be shared amongst anyone who logs in through that account. So Google, the analytics separates reports and dashboards based on the Google account that you're using to log in. So the only things that are shared amongst everyone who has access to a particular Google Analytics property or profile are the shared dashboards that are on the left there in the dashboards column. You'll see they're either labeled private or they're labeled shared. Everything else is private to your specific Google account or Gmail account or whatever it might be. So I would recommend that if you want to have your own account, which I strongly would recommend, that make sure you're an administrator and make sure it's tied to just your personal account. And then the vendors can have access to a more generic user level account, and that way you're in control of the data and you know what's going on there.
Okay, one more question and then we'll wrap it up. Here's a follow-up question from Mike Scarf. He had a question around paid search campaign impression share. What percentage should you be shooting for before you start spending money on display or network ads? So how do you know that you're kind of optimized and where you need to be on paid search, and how does that drive your budget allocation decisions?
So basically, so just so we understand the question properly, let me relate it to, or just to frame it, I guess. So in other words, it's almost like owning your backyard versus conquesting, right? It's like what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators, or what are the metrics that we need to be looking at to know what that sort of high watermark is, to know that we've optimized, we've done all we can, so to speak, to optimize in our own backyard before we start conquesting, aka before we start expanding to display. So yeah, and then Matt, do you want to you're certainly in the the thick of it.
Yeah, I don't have a firm percentage off the top of my head that I would recommend for that. I think it would definitely vary. Definitely depending on the campaign that you're running. If it's a say for example a branded search campaign, you'll definitely want to make sure that that's an extremely high percentage, 90% or above. But it really depends on I don't know what type of campaigns you're running. I don't have a firm answer for that, a very concrete percentage that I can give you. Yeah, I would just go. I would look more for, again, always going back to GA. That's just what what I prefer to do. Metrics like search impression share, are important, but you probably the things you really want to pay attention to are the conversions you're getting out of that paid search, the money that you're making from people visiting your site and clicking to call your mobile numbers and submitting leads, things like that. You'll want to look at those are the metrics that you'll probably want to focus on more as opposed to search impression share. But let me just, if we can take one more minute, let me actually frame the question a little bit differently for you, Matt. So if you were going to build out a search campaign, just a PPC, no retargeting, just text-based ads, how would you go about determining the optimal budget to spend for a particular DMA, for example, for a dealer? Well, that would come with with time. You'd have to see how it goes over the first couple of months and work from there. Because initially it might be it's going to be touch and go at the beginning to make sure that your cost per click is where you want it to be, and you're getting the number of visitors that you're aiming for. And it's definitely it's a work. It's an iterative process. So with every week brings new data, and you can start looking at it. And the more data you have, the more of an educated approach you can take.
I'll ask one more follow-up. Sorry, I'm just curious about this because this is getting out of my level of expertise and certainly into Matt's, right in the thick of Matt's expertise. So how would you go about? I'm not asking for an exact formula, but how would you go about, sort of determining the range of budget to start with, right? So say new market, totally new market, depending on the brand. Obviously, I know there's so many variables, but let's just say, okay, well, where do we start? Obviously, we're not, it's more than just throwing darts at a dartboard, or more than just picking we'll just start with 5K a month or 2K a month or whatever. How would you hone in on, at least generally speaking, where to start?
Yeah, look at the, I'd use things like, the Google Insights tools, the Google keyword tools, just to get an idea of what the search volume is for the particular area that you're running this campaign in. And then from there, you can start to, figure out what a recommended budget would be, what will it take, how much do you have to spend to actually really make an impact and to, drive the number of clicks that you're looking for. It's also, and it will depend on the type of campaign you're running too. Something like a more OEM-focused campaign where you're just optimizing for, Honda dealers, or, Honda dealers want, in a particular geographic area, those types of keywords. Those we find tend to convert better, so you might want to put more money into that than you would, say, just the more generic new make model searches, which, definitely those play more of a part in first introducing someone to your website, but you don't see a lot of hard conversions from those right off the bat. So, you don't want to allocate maybe a little less to that. So it definitely depends, on the search volume. Use Google's tools. They'll show you the way. They'll give you some kind of idea, so you're not just throwing darts at a dartboard.
Okay.
So we have a lot of follow-up questions coming in, but we're closing in on an hour here, so I want to be able to wrap it up. We'll definitely follow up offline with anyone who still has additional questions. We're happy to do that, but we kind of wanted to respect your time. That concludes the end of the Q&A session. We are able, for those who want to stick around, to give a short demo of the dealer position system. As Ken said, it's our attempt at marrying up all of the dealers' diverse data sets, from Google Analytics to your DMS data to your call and chat vendors. We actually just pushed a new release this week that gives you a really cool drill down into your different campaign traffic. So there's a lot to look at. So if you'd like to join us for about a 15-minute demo, please feel free. If you don't have time to stick around, here's a link to our site. You'll be able to schedule a demo with us. We're happy to do a private demo with you one-on-one. But we really want to thank you for your time today, and for joining us. As I said, one of the webinar attendees will win a 30-minute Google Analytics consulting session with Matt. We can take a look at your specific data, or if you had any questions around, am I setting the goals up properly? How can I get my dashboard to get me the information I want? Really, any question you want to bring to the table, one attendee will win that session. As I said, we'll announce it directly after the webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @StringAuto, and we'll also let you know the winner in the follow-up email that we send tomorrow with the webinar recording. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it back to Ken, and for those that would like to join us, let's take a look at the dealer positioning system.
All right. Oops, there we go. Thank you once again, Dina. Okay, so let me get this, get ourselves situated here. I will be warned, I will be a little bit putting on my my sales hat here, simply because I am very proud of what we have produced with this. I think it really comes from tons and tons of conversations, really feeling the pain of dealers, not just clients, but people we've encountered in the industry, prospects, et cetera, and everybody seems to have the same set of issues around data. It's centering around some of these key questions of what's working for me and what's not. All the questions, basically all the questions that we have encountered today during the webinar. Really, we're trying to do a good job and certainly take a first crack at building a product around providing answers to these questions in an automated fashion, so that you can log in whenever you want, rather than trying to put together reports 2 weeks after the end of the month, for example, or 7 days after the end of the month. Everybody scrambling, what worked for me, what didn't work for me, where should we put money this month, next month, et cetera, et cetera. So really trying to get down to those, to answer those core questions, even in midstream. So I'll, again, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, seeing that we're over the hour mark, but Let's start with the summary view. This is our dashboard. So this is actually a patent pending data visualization. It shows the web traffic to lead to sales funnel in a very, very visual fashion. So like I mentioned earlier in the webinar, we are really trying to make data easy for dealers to digest. I mean, that's a huge driver of us internally. That's one of our reasons for existence. And so, we're very good at crunching numbers, but we also like to think that we're very good at making things very visual. And so this dashboard, this bubble chart as we call it, is the first thing that you'll see when you log in, and that's really trying to give you a very visual representation of, again, web traffic, leads, and sales. And so high level, we have split, and you actually saw these categories of traffic during one of the reports that we created in Google, the more e-commerce focused report. We have direct and branded traffic, SEO traffic, SEM PPC traffic, and referral traffic. So those are the four major categories of traffic to your website. And you can see the red rings and the green dashed lines, green and white dashed lines up here. What that represents is, in this particular case, a decrease month on month. We're looking at the last 30 days. So last 30 days, the previous 30 days. So month on month decrease, but an increase in organic traffic, in SEO traffic. And so right away, very visually, you can see if there are opportunities for success or things that you're doing well that maybe you can build upon. And I'll get into a little bit more of a drill down in a sec. And so leads, these are web leads, phone leads, and chat leads. And so where this data comes from, the web leads and all the web traffic, that's directly coming in from Google Analytics. So right from the source. Phone leads, in this particular case, I believe this is CallSource, directly from their API, from their system. And chat leads, in this particular case, Contact at Once. So, we work with multiple different vendors. We don't play favorites. We just want to get good data into the tool and make sure it's represented very, very simply and visually for dealers. And lastly, sales data, that's pretty straightforward. That comes in directly from the DMS, and we separated it into new and used. So that's not, these aren't estimated sales. This is actually from your DMS. And so at a high level, you can see what has changed at an actual raw numbers basis. So again, we noticed that there was a green white dashed line around the SEO traffic. We see it's actually up 9% month on month, whereas paid traffic is down, referral traffic, direct branded. So you can start to get a more specific idea of what's up and what's down by category. And you can see the same for leads as well. So chat is up, although it's only one lead month on month, but still that's good. People are using chat. Phone leads down a bit, web leads down a bit as well. And of course, looking at sales, you can see the sales numbers. And of course, you can even drill down by model as well. And so let me actually blow out. So that's the summary view at a base level. And now we'll blow it out a bit to the detailed view. Now we start to get a little bit more insight. So this is almost like in the e-commerce report that we saw. This is basically like drilling in one level deeper, like Matt was showing. And so in this particular case, we can see that direct and branded traffic was down, but direct is pretty much flat. It's branded traffic that's down month on month. So direct's actually up 3%. Branded traffic is down 30%. And so now we're getting a little more specific. Now we can start to pinpoint areas that we might want to focus on. And you can see the same for SEO. You can see up, but the vehicle details landing page for SEO is actually down 13%. And the reason we are using landing pages, keywords for SEO, again, I had mentioned in passing during the webinar that Google has started shifting away from revealing keywords for organic search. And so we wanted to get ahead of that and start focusing on the landing pages, start focusing on the content on the website, rather than have to focus so much on keywords, which are disappearing from an SEO perspective anyway. And then we have PPC traffic by campaign, and of course referral traffic as well. And there's your OEM traffic, for example, choosenissan.com. And again, leads, we can see the same. We can see that based on the phone number, we can see paid traffic, PPC, the phone number that's pegged to PPC campaigns is actually up, whereas the more, so to speak, organic, if you will, phone numbers are down month on month. And if you look at web leads, same sort of scenario as well. We start to drill in as just like with chat and with phone. And so actually, if you notice here, and this will take us down a little bit further on this dashboard, so we've highlighted what we call a gem, or an action item. And we'll see where that comes into play a little bit further down. We can see that it says conversion rates on Google Maps clicks are below 0.5%. Consult with your web provider and check active goals in Google Analytics. So again, we're trying to do the heavy lifting and take dealers one step closer, not just to displaying the data, but actually helping them interpret that data and coming up with business rules around the data to, again, help them save time, save money, pinpoint the problem areas or opportunities for success, if you will, and help execute on those rather than doing it, again, in the rearview mirror retrospectively. So I'm going to go down very briefly here. Very quickly, this is more of a traditional time series, or almost a smoother line chart. Again, blue means traffic, gray means leads, green means sales. Those colors, of course, correspond to the bubble chart. And so this just gives you a way of seeing peaks and valleys across, rather than just a snapshot month on month. This gives you, again, the peaks and valleys with weekends highlighted as well. And in fact, major holidays are called out too, although we don't have any that have been called out in this particular time frame. So for example, Labor Day would be called out earlier in September. So again, just giving you more context around what has been happening and allowing you to see any potential correlations between traffic, leads, and sales. So maybe you started a new TV spot, right? Maybe you started that, for example, let's pick, I don't know, maybe it was, for whatever reason, you started on a Monday, okay? And then you see a slight spike in traffic, spike in leads, and then a corresponding spike in sales. So trying to give you that visibility. And again, that's just trying to save time and ultimately save money and be more efficient. So with regard to the punch list, the actionable items, so to speak, we see here, this is the one that we were looking at above, low conversion rates on websites. We go from the very, very tactical, the blocking and tackling type of insights. So this is very basic. Obviously, it should be familiar to everybody. Used inventory merchandising, for example, add pictures to 27 vehicles. That's basic stuff, but again, it's very important with regard to conversion rates. You remember the used inventory list that we saw in the GM dashboard? We saw that was it the Wrangler, I believe, is that or the Cherokee? One of the Cherokee, had a ton of VDP views, but very few conversions. And so, quite possibly that was not for this dealer, for a totally different dealer. But the point is, you can see where it all starts to tie together because, well, if you're not merchandising your vehicles properly, sure, you might get a lot of views, but you're not going to get a lot of conversions. So it's all important, even as basic as some of these might be. And so, down here, we're getting a little more strategic. So point is, we're trying to, I won't get into the details too much more here. The point is, we're trying to automate the process of interpreting the data for you. And again, it's all based on your own data coming in straight from the data sources. So we're trying to automate the process of interpreting that to save you time, save you money, and allow you to have more educated conversations with your vendors and effectively empower you to have those conversations. So that's the dashboard. I'm going to go fairly high level through the other dashboards. Again, I'm trying to be sensitive to everybody's time. Let's look at vehicle sales. So if we take a look at this particular dealer's sales, you can see all of it's a simple Google map. All of the new sales for this period are the blue squares. All the pre-owned sales are the yellow squares. And these are, again, this is pulled from the DMS, so this is geolocated, so to speak, on a map to give you a pretty good idea of where exactly you're selling cars. And sometimes, this data exists in many different formats, again, even straight from, for example, Reynolds or ADP printout. But what we find is, again, visualizing the data, looking at it with your eyes in a map format is much more useful than looking at it on, a 3-page, 4-page printout from Reynolds. And so what we're trying to do here, we're not just displaying sales data, we're also, you can see all these zip codes that are drawn out with various shades of blue. And so those are actually all the different web traffic sources, and they're geolocated by Google. So it's never 100% perfect, but Google does a pretty good job of being able to geolocate web traffic. And so again, we're pulling it back. You can see over here on the right-hand side under traffic sources, the 4 major categories of traffic. So now we can see where the web traffic was coming from and correlate that with where we're selling cars. And for example, if we were to say, okay, well, let's let's look at just the SEM and PPC traffic. You can see that there's certainly a chunk of traffic coming up from north of the city, from out west as well, even from a little bit south of where the dealer is. And you can say, well, maybe, again, giving the dealer better tools to have a more empowered, more educated conversation, you might say, hey, you know what? It looks like we're actually pulling in a chunk of PPC traffic from up north, but we're not really selling any vehicles from up here. So, and given that there's a competitive dealership right here, that's what all these red pins are. It's quite possible that they're coming to our site, shopping us, and then going right down the road to the dealer that's closer to them. And so effectively, we're, not to put it in blunt terms, but potentially we're paying for our competitor to get leads. So I don't want to put it in those blunt terms, but again, it's trying to display the data in a very actionable, intelligent fashion. And we actually have a partnership. Last piece of this little zip code jigsaw puzzle here. We actually have a partnership with Polk to provide vehicle registration data. And so by clicking this button, I've now got a pretty good visualization of which vehicles were registered in the most recent period in those zip codes. And so this will allow us to get a little bit more strategic to be able to say, okay, well, if the dealership is located here, let's take a look at this. So we've got, looks like in the last period there were 18 new on-brand vehicles registered. In this case, it's Nissan. 350 used across all brands vehicles registered. And we actually have data down to, in our next release, we'll have a bit of a more detailed drill down, so to speak, for that pop-up to get down to the make and model level as well. So you can start to calculate market share, potential opportunity, how good of a fit is this zip code for advertising in, start to get more into the demographics. So again, be more strategic with your advertising dollars. So let me move on to inventory. We'll cover this quickly, and then we'll get down. Dina mentioned the new dashboard, the traffic dashboard, so we'll get to that, and we'll see how that relates to the initial dashboard. So this is what's called a tree map up top. It's just a different way, a very visual way of representing data, and in this particular case, it's inventory data, new inventory data. So you can see what's on the lot right now, model by model in this particular case. And of course, you can switch to used, and you can even drill in, and again, you can even drill into trim as well. So the idea is to provide a visual means of representing critical data. So let me move down a bit here. You can see the same data is displayed in this vertical format, in this bar chart. You can see what's on the lot versus what was sold in the previous period. So you can get a pretty good picture right away, very visually, of what you have in stock, again, versus what was sold, with some aging here and even some merchandising tips, photos, prices. And this is where things get interesting. We start to triangulate 3 different data sets together. So again, current inventory, historical sales over the last 30 days, and then we have Dadian, who's also a great partner of ours. We implement, or integrate, I should say, their ASI scores, their Automotive Shopper Intensity scores. And really simply, what the ASI score means is based on all of Dadian's data across 12,000 auto industry websites. They take this data, they crunch the numbers on a DMA by DMA basis. This is data that's very, very relevant and very local. This is not, your sort of broad brush, here's what's happening across the country. This is what's happening in your market. It is search data, online search data, on a model by model basis, per manufacturer, of course, and again, per market. So in other words, Dadian is able to say, in the Boston market, in this particular case, Nissan Altimas, month on month, have been searched 146% more frequently than they were last month. Now, why is that important? That's important because there's an 84% correlation between the ASI score and subsequent sales 6 to 8 weeks in the future in that DMA. So in other words, knowing that Nissan Altimas are being searched 150% more frequently this month than they were last month gives you effectively a 6-week crystal ball into knowing what is going to be selling, good or bad, in the market. So in this particular case, we can assume with pretty good confidence that Altima sales are going to be up, whereas GTR sales are going to be down in another 6 weeks in the Boston market. So pretty powerful stuff. And then when you triangulate that ASI score with what you have in stock and of course what you've sold, you now start to get a pretty good picture of maybe getting a jump on your competition from either a new or used perspective. Again, it's all down to the model, even the trim level, and you can start to figure out, well, okay, if I know I want to, for example, move a particular model or really start advertising a particular model, because, for example, instead of, say, being up 150%, maybe we know that search activity is down 150%. Let's get a jump on everybody else. Let's start cost-effectively advertising those units to try to get them off the lot, if that's a decision we want to make. And so, using this tool, you can not only get insight into what is sort of the future, if you will, 6 weeks into the future of what's going to sell or what's not going to sell relative to a previous month, but also, of course, again, where you want to be doing your advertising. What's driving, which areas, which traffic sources are driving most of your sales. Pull it back up to the dashboard even. What is effective month on month, period on period. And let me pull it back to the traffic drill down. Very, very granular, based on traffic source and based on campaign or landing page. What are the best campaigns that are working for me? What are the best landing pages that are working for me? So in this particular case, we have the top 3 campaigns that are working, and we've got the bottom 3 campaigns. So now you can actually really take all that insight that we were just talking about and start to get granular in terms of, well, what is working and what isn't working. And we don't just give you the top 3, we actually go a little bit deeper than that for both the top and the bottom, I should say. And to give you some visual context, we even take a screenshot automatically of the most, or the top, I should say, landing page for that particular campaign. So now we're getting into some really pretty powerful stuff by being able to say, okay, well, what is working for me and what's not working for me, both on an off-site perspective as well as an on-site perspective. And so we also take the added step of giving you a very high-level overview of the types of traffic, generally speaking, that particular campaign or landing page or referral source is driving to the site. So you can see that the brand, this particular ad campaign, the branded PPC campaign, is driving actually a decent amount of service traffic. It's driving more inventory traffic and a little bit of just general dealership info traffic. And so, depending on what the purpose of that particular campaign is, you can start to say, well, is this doing its job? Yes or no? And over here on the right, this gives you an indication of how relevant the traffic is. So we talked about being able to maximize your dollars spent. If a campaign, for example, is sending, in this particular case, it's pretty well optimized, but for example, if you have most of your traffic or a good chunk of your traffic for a particular campaign or traffic source coming from way beyond your dealership, well, that's probably an indication of the campaign not being optimized properly. So that would be an indication of sort of the external or offsite optimization you can do. You can tweak, you can pull the area back, make it a more tightly focused campaign rather than trying to blast it out across, a huge geographic region or, God forbid, the entire country, and pull, pay for clicks that are never going to convert. You can say, okay, well, I want to pull it back to something that's a little bit more focused around my dealership. And as you can see, this is actually, like I said, a pretty well optimized campaign. Most of the traffic is coming from very close to the dealership, so it's well optimized in that particular regard. So that's the power of the traffic drill down. Again, taking the dashboard insights, the broad brush insights about what's working and what's not, and really taking it down to a landing page or campaign perspective. And so that we feel is is very powerful and really takes that extra step in saving dealers so much time and so much aggravation in trying to dig this stuff up. We love Google Analytics, but it does require a little bit of elbow grease to get it to work the way, in our opinion, it should work for the auto industry, for example, and for auto websites, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we've tried to do is take a lot of that heavy lifting and a lot of the auto-specific insights and idiosyncrasies that that make this industry so interesting and build that into the product. So that way it's all there for you and it's all effectively spoon-fed. And again, we don't view dealers are not. They're not put on this earth to run spreadsheets and crunch numbers and try to configure Google Analytics. I mean, we commend everybody who takes the time to do that. And as we said, as we saw in the webinar, it's not super difficult, and there are some really simple things you can do. But ultimately, we're not here to be data analysts, right? We're not here to be basically business intelligence people. We're here to use the analysis of the data that hopefully someone else has done for us to more effectively sell cars. So that's what we're trying to do with this product. Save everybody time, save everybody aggregation, and get everybody to more cost effectively and more efficiently sell more cars. So that is, I'll stop here. I could talk for hours about this, and if someone dares me, I might, but I obviously won't to be sensitive to everybody's time. But that's it, a high-level overview of the dealer positioning system. And like I said, it's something that we're very, very proud of. It's something that we've spent a lot of time and energy on. We have a great team here. We understand technology, we understand data, and we understand the car industry. And so the dealer positioning system is, is sort of the fruits of our labors in that regard. So there we go. That's it.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Matt. And thank you to all the attendees for taking time out of your day to spend a little time with us talking about data. As Ken said, we're pretty passionate about it and can talk about it forever. But we appreciate your time. If you have any questions on Google Analytics, on the dealer positioning system, either drop us a line in the chat or offline. We're happy to talk further. If you're going to be at Digital Dealer, we'll be at booth 1125. Stop by and see us. But again, thanks for your time, and be on the lookout for a recording of this session tomorrow. Thank you very much for your time.